a little bit about the resource management of the park. So it's kind of off on a different track than what you've been listening to for the last several weeks.
Cultural or natural?
All of it, Rick. All of it. First of all, so many of you I'm sure don't know who I am. I'm Virginia DuBowy, and I am the Natural Resources Program Manager here at the park. And no, that is not a real snake.
Good.
But it looks real, and it has the right effect. And I also have collateral duties in the park. So during the Sesquicentennial, I hung out at the Shirley House quite a bit. So. But I also like to brag about my connection to Vicksburg the Civil War as my introduction. So I give all the credit to the Steen brothers. This is my great-great-grandfather, Martin Steen, with the 38th Iowa. And here's 3 of his brothers, who are all with the 12th, and they were all here at Vicksburg during the siege. So I have a connection. The 3 brothers, they were up on Graveyard Road. My great-great-grandfather was up behind the Walmart. So my husband keeps telling me that my great-great-grandfather defended the Walmart during the siege. There was another brother who was with the 1st Minnesota who got his leg shot off at Gettysburg at the same time his brothers were at Vicksburg. And then their youngest brother ended up in Andersonville prison. The best part of this whole story is they all survived and made it home. So they all lived to ripe old ages, which was great for me because I wouldn't be here otherwise. I'm here to talk about, like I say, the resource management of the park. It's a little bit different. And I must say that 13 years ago in 2001, when I sat next to David Maggio in the first guide seminar that I was ever at, I never expected that I would be up in front of a bunch of prospective guides. I'm trying to think of the word there. So this is really quite an honor for me to come that far. But Vicksburg's place in the National Park Service, they were authorized by Congress in 1899 to preserve and interpret the 1863 campaign and siege, focusing on the cultural and the historical features of the park. So that meant commemoration, which Ray just went over, talking about the monuments. And I must say, it took me a long time to realize there was another little boy over here so that I didn't see him in the picture for the longest time. Enhanced visitor experience. Like he said, this was the only monument on the battlefield in the beginning. We've come a long way since then. Interpretation. This is up at Fort Hill back in the 50s. You can see them. The Rangers, this is how the Rangers used to dress in those full dress uniforms and when they got on their interpretive tours. And then preservation. One of our biggest roles in the Park Service is the preservation aspect. But we all know today the park serves a whole lot of different purposes. It's not just for interpretation and commemoration. We have a lot of school programs. We are trying very hard to extend our reach out into the region, the schools, anywhere where we can bring new blood into the park. So we've had a lot of success with our junior ranger camps. We've had 4th grade overnight camps. That was a big success last year. And then our youth leadership academy went over very well for high school students. We also have community events. Of course, the Run Through History every year. A lot of you have probably participated in that. Concerts such as we had during the Sesquicentennial, and we will be having another concert over Memorial Day this weekend, or this month, next month. And then the Tours and Writers Conference was essentially the kickoff event for our Sesquicentennial celebration that we had. We also have a lot of recreational opportunities. We've got hiking, we've got walking, jogging, biking, and we've actually installed a visitor recreation area just for that purpose. And we can explore the park's natural resources. Now, you were wondering how I was going to segue into all this. But we do have a lot of bird watchers in the park. And we've actually had several junior ranger activities, such as a night owl walk, which the kids liked. And then I do a lot of wildflower identification, especially for, I think it's the sophomore class at Warren Central High School that has to do a flower collection. So I get a lot of questions on that. So, natural resources in the cultural resource park. Remember I said the mandate focused on cultural and historical. So where do we come in on this? Well, as a unit of the NPS, we have to meet the Organic Act. That stated, and I like the way it's stated here, to conserve the scenery and the natural and historic objects. Natural comes before historic, I like that. And the wildlife, which is 2 words, therein, and to provide for the enjoyment of the same in such manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations.
Methinks she doth protest overmuch.
Oh, Tim, be quiet. There's not a lot of other laws that we have to take into consideration. Everything we do in this park has to have compliance done. If you work for the Corps of Engineers, you know what I'm talking about. The Endangered Species Act, Wetlands Protection Act, Migratory Birds. These are just a few of the many laws and acts that we have to follow in order to do any project in the park. Every project we put into the system has to have some sort of compliance, whether it be just a categorical exclusion, a full-blown EA, or a really full-blown EIS. We have to do something. And it has to cover the natural resources, the historic resources, and any other resource acts that need to be followed.
What's your acronyms?
I was gonna say.
EAS?
Environmental assessment or environmental impact statement. If you can avoid an environmental impact statement at all costs, that's good. Those things are about this thing. So what's a major natural resource at VICK? Well, how about let's start with the river. Essentially, the river is why Vicksburg is here. The river itself is over 2,300 miles long. Starts all the way up here, Lake Itasca. If you've walked across that, that's cool. All the way down here to the Gulf. It drains 41% of the continental U.S., including all or parts of 31 states, and actually 2 Canadian provinces. Some of the neat things about Mississippi drainage. This is Lake Traverse right up here. Lake Traverse actually drains to the north, this way. But this is the first major river that goes into the Mississippi right here, and it drains to the south. So they've got this sign. There's a continental divide right through here. They've got this sign sitting on Lake Traverse that tells you which direction you're going. And it flows all the way down to the Atchafalaya Basin. And I have been told that if there weren't so many control structures on the Mississippi here, the Atchafalaya River would have grabbed the Mississippi and it would be flowing here instead of here, because it's that much stronger than the Mississippi River. We get some pretty neat water going by Vicksburg. The water from Old Faithful drains into here, runs by Vicksburg. Water from the Great Smoky Mountains drains into the Mississippi drainage, comes by Vicksburg. Water from northeastern New Mexico drains to the Canadian River into the Mississippi drainage, past Vicksburg. And water from the Allegheny up in New York drains all the way down, and that water flows by Vicksburg. So we get water from all over the place. So I think this title is quite appropriate, Vicksburg, as keepers of the river. We were actually a major river port, of course, back before the siege. A lot of riverboat traffic, a lot of railroad traffic. It was the only crossing at that point where you could get cars from Louisiana over here. And one more significant natural resource at VICK, and I'm taking liberty with this statement, but it's all in the dirt around here. A lot of land. Well, that land was what made the bluffs here at Vicksburg. So we look at some of the ecological setting here. Vicksburg is situated on a natural fortress of 200-foot bluffs along the Mississippi River. As Ray pointed out, or as Tim pointed out when he was talking about the various points along the tour road, you stand at Fort Hill and you look across, and it's flat. And you're pretty high up. So it's obviously was a very defensible position along the river. The bluffs are composed of a wind-blown glacial deposit of sand and clay. It's called Loess, however you want to say it. I call it Loess. The Loess itself, it's plate-like particles, and they're locked together with calcium carbonate or lime. So you got all these particles, and they're sealed together. But it has a high porosity, means it's got a lot of empty space between all these plates, and it's very lightweight. Now that's a word you need to remember, lightweight. However, because all those plates are fused together with the lime, nothing can get from empty space to empty space. So it's almost completely impermeable. Water cannot percolate through it, and it cannot penetrate it. So therefore, water is not stored in it. That's why it is so lightweight. Very few springs exist in the Loess soil, and those that do usually go dry by July and September, through September. And that's true around here. Most of the water that we have is ephemeral. It just dries up. Lack of water storage means the runoff is rapid and streams are subject to flash flooding. And if you've ever seen some of our creeks, Glass Bayou or mid-spring after a heavy rain, you can't believe how brown they are for all the soil that has washed into the creeks. And that creates a problem because eventually when the water goes down, you get a silt deposit. This happened back in, I think, like 2007 or 9, I can't remember. This is the base of the falls at Mid-Spring, totally silted in. You couldn't walk across it. It was all dirt. Eventually, the creek backed up enough and it washed it all away. But it was just amazing to walk down there and the whole creek was totally silted in, right below the falls. It's quite soft and easy to work with. Undisturbed state supports large tunnels, and I'm sure you went through this when you talked about through the siege and things. That was a property exploited by both the military and the civilians during the siege of Vicksburg. Of course, they dug the caves. But also that impermeability, because water doesn't percolate through it, allowed the caves to stay dry, and therefore they stayed cooler. So they weren't the hot, muggy living spaces that you would think of. They actually stayed cooler because of their dryness. It does have some troubling properties, however. Because water won't percolate through it, anything running across its exposed surface quickly erodes it. This is one of the major, if not the major problem that this park has in its management, is trying to keep up with the erosion. This property gives the hills, the whole area that they call the Loess Hills, a prominent characteristic, and you can see from this old map that the ravines run every which way, and they're deep. They're very deep. If you get out and walk some of this land between the two tour roads, you would find that it's pretty tough going, trying to get up and down these hills and ravines.
Virginia,
Yeah.
if you take some Loess soil, scoop it up, let's say, and put it back somewhere, does it cleave back together? I didn't think so.
Once you disturb it, that was such an issue back during the siege, when they could cut those caves at a right angle, and they'd be very stable until something disturbed it, like a shell or something. And then it just dissolves. It's basically rock dust. They call it rock flour. Because once it's disturbed, you've broken that connection. And that's why the water would so easily erode it when the soil is disturbed. Like when a tree falls out there, it's ripped up the soil's been disturbed, the rain hits it, and it just erodes it, tunnels it, you get runnels all over the place. Now the entire Loess substrate is underlain by a limestone layer, and you see this very prominently over at Mid Springs, if you could get back there right now. These are actually natural stairs going up from mid-spring. I noticed it as I was standing in the cemetery and I looked across the way and I could see these steps, so I actually got down there and looked at them close. And they're just natural, I think they're natural cuts, I can't say they are, but they look like they've just been worn away. Although this was a very popular area for picnickers and things way back when, they used to come and sit at the falls. Maybe somebody constructed these, I don't know. But it does hold a ton of fossils. We have a lot, if you get up close and personal to this limestone, you'll see all sorts of these fossils throughout the whole layer.
Virginia, you might mention that Mid Springs is closed.
Oh, yes. We had a bad slough at the base of the bluff where we did the concrete walls. And now it's just terribly ripped up and holy and everything, and we just can't allow anybody back there to get back to the falls because it's just too dangerous to walk.
The footing, there are holes in the earth that you can't see, and so that area is closed to visitors.
Yeah. This is the type of landscape that VICK was mandated to preserve and interpret. This is actually up at Fort Hill. It was pretty effective because it allowed Confederate soldiers to hold off the Union troops for over 6 weeks. Obviously, there weren't many trees. This is Coonskin's Tower over by the 3rd Louisiana Command. But there were still lots of things growing. And this is what I found kind of interesting. I have several quotes from soldiers who would make diary entries during the siege. And one of my favorites, a more beautiful May morning than that of the 19th I had never seen. The pickets had ceased firing, the birds sang sweetly in the trees, and the cool morning breeze was fragrant with the perfume of flowers and shrubs. It was hard to believe that such a beautiful morning as that would bring such an eve as followed it. And that was the assault on the 19th of May. Some of the other quotes that I found: alligators are quite plenty here. The boys have captured several. They are very pretty things. I wish I could send you one in the letter. Men on drill practice welcomed any distraction. Very often in maneuvering in the field, the Virginian reminisced, an old hare would jump up, shake his white tail by way of challenge, and bound off. In that case, goodbye to all discipline. Regardless of officers' commands, the soldiers with one shout would start after him. A strange characteristic of this Southern Army was their insane desire to run a hare. This was a quote talking about how the men would forage by whatever means they could. And one Virginian wrote, as an excuse for his foraging, "We would not allow any man's chickens to run out in the road and bite us as we marched along." And one other one, they were talking about lining up in battle. The bees had been very quiet. Men can stand up and be shot at all day with the deadly musket, but when a swarm of bees pounces upon a company of men in concert, it's beyond human nature to stand it, and so 2 or 3 companies retired from the field. So you can see, nature takes its revenge on a few of us every once in a while. Yes, ma'am.
This is probably a really stupid question, but I always worry about this. I am so subject to poison ivy that I always fret about the poor soldiers that have to go camping and walking around and rummaging and fighting. Was there poison ivy here? Did they have to worry about something?
Oh, I'm sure there was, and I'm sure they were affected by it, but they probably, I don't know if they realized what it was doing to them. I'm sure they did, because a lot of these plants were used or avoided because of their properties, medicinal properties, whatever. So I'm sure it had to be out there. And I'm sure many men were affected by it, just like we are today.
Many of the Union soldiers' diaries speak of chiggers.
Yeah.
Very few of them speak kindly.
Can't imagine any of them did.
That's one of the things Virginia can notice. If you ever go by the Alabama Mine, it's probably one of the best marks out there. That you look at the men's pants leg over here inside, the men's pants leg are tied up. They got ropes around the bottom of their pants leg, and they're keeping the chiggers
Keep the
flying.
chickens out, they're glossing their
The only one
pants,
you
yeah.
really see it, that it shows it like that. It's amazing to see it.
So they had run-ins with a lot of nature out there, yeah. Now, the landscape today, of course, is covered with immense stands of what mostly is second-growth forest, and it's become home to over 300 different types of plants and many species of animals. We've done a lot of inventories. So we've recorded 37 species of mammals in the park, over 140 species of birds, 27 reptile species and 18 amphibian species, 18 fish species, 4 freshwater mussel species, but I must say these are all historic. We have not found a single live mussel in the park when we did our inventory. These were all historic populations that we found the shells from these 4 species. Vascular plants, over 300. And over 455 acres of wetlands. That's about a quarter of the park itself is classified as a wetland. And like I said, wetlands protection is one of the laws we have to follow, so.
How many of these reptiles will we have run-ins with?
Probably not. The only ones you will see, you might see box turtles on the road, and you might see some snakes on the road.
Well, some snakes is more than I want to say.
Too early in the day for a lounge lizard. most of the
But
time.
to try not to rattle them, please. They are all protected. As with all things, some plants and animals are good, some are not so good. I have a few examples here. These are good birds. We like these birds. These are not such good birds. They kind of wander in from the neighbor's property. They don't do a whole lot of damage, but they're just kind of annoying. We have good mammals. We have very bad mammals. We have good insects. However, I have a few people in this room that would debate that one right there. As being a good
First couple
insect.
thousand in the bedroom aren't so bad, are they?
They actually are good, garden pest hunters, and then of course the butterfly for pollinators. But then we also have these downright nasty things called fire ants. Try to watch where you're walking whenever you get out of your vehicle.
We like to build next to monuments.
Yeah, monuments, anywhere.
Y'all protect those as well?
We have good buffer plants. This is an oak leaf hydrangea, this is a native. And you'll notice these little things down here at the bottom. I did another talk where I gave a lot of the uses for these plants or how they were named or whatnot. And then we have the curse of the boundary, which is the Chinese privet. Unfortunately, if we tried to remove it from the boundary, we wouldn't have a boundary left, probably. So unfortunately, we have to leave a lot of it there. But it was introduced mainly during the CCC era when they planted all the trees in the 30s as a buffer plant, not realizing how quickly it would spread and become a nuisance plant. We monitor a lot of the resources in the park, especially the natural resources. We've done a deer monitoring program. We did a year-long study to see how healthy our population was, how many we had, whether we should start worrying about if they were going to eat us out of house and home. So far, we're doing okay, no browse lines, but there's always a possibility. Since they are so protected in this park, they do very well. And I swear, every doe last year got 10 twins.
Did you say you had a number of how many deer live in the national park?
I think they estimated around 120 to 200 here, which is, that's kind of high. 200 is kind of high. We'd like to keep it, maybe under 150. But it depends on what time of the year too. They move in during the hunting season and they move out when it's over. They know when the hunting season starts.
Is that GPS they got up there?
Because, all the everything will, during the fall or whatever, everything all of a sudden will just migrate into the park.
Virginia, the cane at the park.
I haven't gotten to that yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, excuse me.
You're getting heavy here.
Well, you went over all the plants, I
Yeah,
thought
well,
you were
no.
through it. I'm sorry.
We also monitor breeding birds, and we do have an ongoing study. We have a USGS scientist that comes in on a regular basis and monitors. And I'll tell you what, I have got the original angry birds here. This is a bluebird nest, and this is a rough-winged swallow. And these two cannon always have the same birds in them. So they are very specific about their nesting sites, but they really like some of the cannon in the battlefield. I wouldn't advise looking in cannon though for nests because you may run into a batch of wasps instead, so not a good thing.
Or spiders.
Or spiders,
Yeah, black widows like it.
yeah, the black widows, they like the cannon up front. Amphibians and reptiles, we do, this is a monthly monitoring. In fact, I'm going out on Thursday to do monitoring. We have what they call coverboard surveys and PVC pipes that are on the trees. And the toads and the snakes and the lizards and the salamanders will all go under the boards. The tree frogs are what we pull out of the pipes. They like to go in there and hide.
Exactly.
4 times a year I go out and monitor the water quality. 3 different sites in the park, Mid-Spring, Durden Creek down by maintenance here, and then Glass Bayou off the Jackson, or the Union Avenue Bridge. And then we also monitor plants. We have done a vegetation map that we've just had completed for the park. But I also go out and monitor these little babies every year. As they're one of the special plants that we have, and the most unique plant we have in the park, because they're a Mississippi species of special concern, meaning they are rare, very uncommon in their range. And the range for this plant is only 4 states: Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida. But Vicksburg National Military Park has gotten an abundant population, and they should be coming out within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And the side of the tour road will be carpeted with these beautiful little purple irises. So just watch them. And people will ask me what they are. I think I've got everybody that works here trained as to what they are, so when somebody comes in and asks, they know what they're talking about. Monitoring plants is probably one of the most difficult things we do. And unfortunately, 28% of the species we have are exotics. The American beautyberry is a native, and this is a beautiful plant that blooms every year. Comes out with these nice purple berries every year. And it's just up past the arch as you're going up the tour road, so you should be able to see it early summer. But this is a great Oregon grape. It may be native to Oregon, but it isn't native to here. This is an escapee from somebody's backyard, but the birds like the berries, and so things get planted in the park. We're home to several exotic plant species, including 5 of Mississippi's top 10 worst weeds. Chinese privet, like I already said, it's probably one of the worst ones we have. Chinese tallow, also called the popcorn tree, because the fruits look like popcorn. We don't have too many of those in the park. Japanese honeysuckle. This was brought in as an ornamental, and now it is spread everywhere. And this thing blooms all year. Johnson grass. It's kind of comes up wherever you clear the place. It's one of those first exotic species that show up. And of course, everybody's favorite, kudzu. I do not have any areas that look like this anymore in the park. We've had a very successful spray program, herbicide program, and cutting to get rid of a lot of the kudzu. Here's some examples of the natives versus the exotics. We have trumpet honeysuckle. This is a native. It's beautiful. I've only ever found it in one spot in the park. And then, of course, the Japanese honeysuckle, which I said is everywhere. We have a trumpet vine. No, this is not poison ivy. I had a hard time convincing my former supervisor this was not poison ivy. This is a native trumpet vine, very popular, very prevalent in the park. We see it all summer long. And it's a legumes. It's got these huge pods on it. And then, of course, there's wisteria. And that's coming out right now. I just noticed that this week it started in bloom. So there's going to be wisteria all over the park, too. But that's a traditional southern porch vine, so you know, you're going to see that. Flowering dogwood, there's your dogwood, Will. That's what it looks like. This is in the cemetery. And then mimosa. Now mimosa was around during the siege because Emma Bellflower talks about having a mimosa tree in her yard. But it is an exotic. It is pretty when it blooms, and we do have it all over the place. Here's your native cane. There you go. Native cane, switch cane, giant cane. It's all the same. But this is what they would use for their cane. This is what was in the cane breaks. This is what they used for their gabions.
But how long, it's not indigenous this area, I assume. How long has it been here?
Well,
As long as we
as
know.
long as historically correct as far as the park is concerned, because it was here during the siege.
Okay.
But I think it's been here longer than that, because I think there were cane breaks in the ravines. You know, they didn't clear out the ravines, they only cleared the ridge tops when they farmed and stuff, so I'm feeling it's been around for quite a while. And then we have the golden bamboo, which as far as I can tell, only makes fishing poles and supports for tents and things like that. So, we do management of these things, quickly, herbicides for our kudzu. We've done mechanical clearing for several different species. And we also do prescribed burning. Now, we don't prescribe burn just to get rid of exotics. We do that to keep the landscape and the fuel down on the landscape, and also to keep the shed open in specific areas. But it does also contribute towards controlling the exotics, especially on Fort Hill, which is full of Johnson grass. We also do management for animals, and we tried to remove the fathead minnow from Mint Spring. We were not as successful as we'd like to be, so they are still there. And then, of course, we also have our feral hog problem. Now, we were very successful with our traps that we used in the park, and I can knock on wood, we haven't seen one in over a year, so hopefully they will stay away. We also have several non-native ornamental plants in the landscape. These were planted on purpose. The ginkgo in the cemetery, and I need to explain something about this ginkgo tree here. It was not in the cemetery at the time of the siege. It was not in the cemetery during the Revolutionary War. I have to correct several people. The entire cemetery wasn't landscaped until after it was established in 1866. In fact, I don't think a lot of the landscaping happened until the 1870s. So that tree did not exist on the first landscape map I have for the cemetery, which was 1917. So that tree had to be planted sometime after 1917. The dogwood that I showed you a few slides back, that was on the 1917 map. So that's been there since the first part of the 20th century, at least. But the ginkgo tree was 30 feet high and 18 inches in diameter in 1933. A month ago, I went out and measured it. It is now 87 feet high and 77 inches in diameter. So it's grown about on average, 3/4 of an inch a year over the last 89 years, or 81 years. We also have crepe myrtles in the park, and to me, this is the perfect example of why not to cut your crepe myrtles off, because these crepe myrtles have never been chopped off like that, and they're beautiful every year. So. And then also near the old administration building, the old soups quarters, whatever you wish to call it, we have Japanese magnolias and camellias, which were obviously planted there for a purpose. That whole area was landscaped too when that house was in use.
Have y'all ever considered, in that old administration building, that's on that second left turn road?
Yeah, it's off Pemberton Avenue.
Has it ever been open?
Well, it's not a public facility because we've always used it for offices and things like that,
But
and
it's such
training.
an interesting looking thing, I've always wondered.
It's got a training room and it's got ranger offices in it, and the seasonal rangers use it. So we do put it to good use.
We also use it as our headquarters for junior ranger programs.
Yeah, exactly. Our landscape landscape also includes recreated sites, like our Heritage Demonstration Garden, which has been very successful. It's a joint project partnership with the Master Gardeners of Warren County. We have gardens at the Pemberton headquarters, and the Master Gardeners have helped with that. And then we've also got the Rose Gardens at the Shirley House, and we get a lot of volunteers. Entergy actually started that garden for us, got them to help us put it in, and then I've managed to have volunteers come and help me with it over the rest of the time. The roses really look pretty in the summer. So we've got a lot of really neat landscapes out there. Part of that, well, we had a big cultural landscape report, and like I said, whenever you do something like this, you have to do something like this. You have to do compliance. So this environmental assessment was done at the same time as this was done so that they would coincide with each other. And this cultural landscape allowed us to meet several objectives. We were able to clear 3 key sites within the park. We were able to create more interpretive opportunities as you're driving through the park. We added new waysides, and this includes some of the high-tech options like the QR codes on several of the waysides. We try to carefully manipulate the vegetation. In other words, we keep it down, we burn it, we mow it to keep those view sheds open. And then we also expose several key historic military and commemorative park features. There's a lot of features out there that you can't see because of those trees. And we expose several monuments and other features when we cut down a lot of those trees. So we've got the area between Railroad Route and the Kentucky Monument. We've got the area between Graveyard Road and North Union Avenue. And we've got the area between Pemberton and Union Avenues and Old Jackson Road. And this is probably the first time a lot of us came down around that curve and we saw those 2 structures from Pemberton Avenue. We all just kind of went, whoa, because it was all, before it had just been solid trees. You didn't even know they were there. So it was a pretty neat view. All these areas had intense military activity going on during the siege. And both armies made use of all the resources they had at hand. The soil, they dug where it was easy to dig, they used the cane, all that. They even used an old sweet gum to make a mortar. And that was over by the 3rd Louisiana Ravine. And that worked for a little while, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of all this sits one of the park's now most significant cultural resources, and I bet you wondered how I was going to segue into that. Well, we've got the Shirley House, and Ray did talk a little bit about the Shirley House. I'm going to show you some of the progressive pictures of it. I do like her statement, war, terrible war, had come to our very hearthstone. I mean, that just epitomized what was going on right there at that spot at that time. This is a house soon after the siege was over. Those are Union occupation troops in front of it. And we know that the house was used as a hospital, it was used as headquarters, it was used for various different, I think eventually it was just abandoned and people just squatted in it. I don't know. But over the years, you can tell its condition. The Shirleys retained ownership but never moved back into it, so the condition just went steadily downhill. So in 1866, you see that the vegetation's growing up, the front porch is falling apart, essentially. 1885, same thing. There's a drive that comes up this way. I'm trying to figure out what these are. They almost look like headstones to me, but I don't know what they are. And of course now there's essentially no front porch on it anymore, and the windows are all, everything's broken out of it. By the time the park was established, this is all that was left. This is what it looked like in 1899. So, the War Department purchased it in 1900 for inclusion in the park. One of the stipulations being that it be restored to the appearance as it was when the Shirleys lived in it. So in 1902, 1903, it went through a significant restoration to bring it back to that appearance, and this is what it looked like at that time. Other restorations over the years altered the integrity of the house. This isn't too bad. You see the front porch is back on. There's probably a little addition to something here. There's stairs here that are no longer there. But in 1939, they screened in the whole back porch, added a garage. You see the old cistern right here too. Front, same thing. They screened in the entire front porch. There was a lot of things done at this period of time that probably shouldn't have been done. And here's the garage. It was added onto the side of the house. There's awnings, of course, on it. See all the vehicles parked here. And the drive comes this way. You're standing looking at it from the direction of the Illinois line. So that's why you can see that old road bed is still there. You can see that. Of course, in 2010, 2011, we had the whole house restored. We got the funding to do that. And the whole main floor has now been redone. We are looking to someday have a furnishings plan or some kind of exhibit plan for the house. We do put things in the house when we have special programs, and it worked quite well. And like I said, we put the garden out in front, and we tried to follow the description that Alice Shirley gave us in her diary of what was out in front of the house. So now it's used for park programs, and it's a main contact station, especially during our busy summer season. So throughout the whole park, our preservation and restoration efforts are critical to fulfill the interpretive mandate and provide a quality experience. And probably the most formidable preservation project we ever undertook was the USS Carroll. This is the act, the legislation that was approved in 1972, allowing the Carroll to be brought to the park and incorporated into the park. These are the three individuals that started it. They went out looking for it. Don Jacks owned the small wooden boat. Warren Grabo was an eco-hydrologist,
For the Corps.
and military historian. And then, of course, Ed Bars was the historian here, and later the National Park historian. And they, like I say, they just had a small boat, an ordinary compass, and a passion to save a piece of American history. Over the years, of course, the location had been lost. And these three decided they were going to go out and find it. They knew kind of sort of where it was, so they took the small boat, their compass, and they just started transecting back and forth across the Yazoo River. And I was told when the compass started to spin, they knew they were over a bunch of iron. And I remember talking to Warren Grabo at one time. He said the river was low at that time. He could reach over the boat and he could feel the top of the pilot house. So they knew they had something. Don't think it was positively identified until they brought up the bell. They knew they had a boat. And it was almost perfectly preserved on the bottom of the river. Everybody knows, sunk on December 12, 1862, the loss of life in the Yazoo River. It was rediscovered in 1956. Parts and artifacts gradually recovered over the next 8 years. So they didn't just find it and leave it. They found it, figured out what it was, and started bringing the artifacts off the boat then, before they decided to raise it. And then they raised it in 3 sections in December, on December 12, 1964, 102 years to the day of the sinking. It was not intended to come up in 3 pieces. But the slings they used couldn't support the weight of the gunboat and all the accumulated silt. So it sliced through the slings sliced through the vessel. And unfortunately, it destroyed a lot of the officers' quarters and everything on the back of the boat. So the artifacts stayed at VICK. Margie Bars was a major factor in keeping them there and going through them and cleaning them out, part of cataloging them all. The vessel itself was taken down to English Shipyard and stored on the beach. For 13 years, it was stored on the beach. They sprayed it with fresh water because they figured that would keep it moist, and over time it lost 50% of the original recovered fabric. So the boat literally fell apart. Okay, it was basically forgotten down there. It started to collapse on itself, and nobody could get money to do anything with it. So entered the Park Service, which initiated a feasibility study in 1968. Finally obtained title to it in 1973 from the Mississippi Agricultural and Industrial Board. Remember, the legislation was 1972, but we didn't get title until 73. But then it took another 4 years to get the process moving to get the boat up here. So they took it apart, numbered it all, brought it up in sections. 27 sections. They barged it up here. And they started constructing the display site, and that's actually property or land where it was intended for expansion of the cemetery, but the cemetery had long been closed by that time. So they decided they'd put the carol there. The recovered artifacts, you notice when you walk in the Carroll Museum, you feel like you're enclosed in something. You're supposed to have that feeling. You're supposed to feel like you're in the bowels of a warship at that time. So that's why it's arranged that way. The scale model they used, 1/24 the size of the original vessels, and the museum was completed before the boat was. So people could stand on top of the museum like you can today and watch them put the boat together. It's like doing a giant jigsaw puzzle. So the original fabric is supported by ghosting. So I tell people anything that looks like driftwood is original. Everything else is ghosting or laminated wood. And the whole frame is done in the framework form with the missing pieces on it. The metal is entirely original, including the 13-mounted guns, and all those pegs you see on the boat, those are all original. And the original gun carriages were actually replaced because they were becoming too fragile to hold the weight of those big, heavy guns. So each carriage, and they were all different, was reproduced according to how that carriage was actually put together. And then they were put on display, and the carriages are all in storage right now. Except there's one on display in the museum. So although it's been open for almost 30 years, we still work on it. We still treat it. We still are cataloging the artifacts, and we're still working on new museum displays.
And that's supposed to be treated this summer.
It is, yes. We're a little behind schedule, but we finally got some funding and we're going to treat it. So you can tell it's a premier exhibit in the Vicksburg National Military Park, and it's known around the world because we get so many visitors that come here and they'll show up at 10 minutes to 5 and say, I came all this way just to see the gunboat Cairo, and you've still got 20 minutes to go to get to it. But it's really an impressive exhibit, and you can tell because now we have our own stamp that depicts the carol, and of course it was featured on the Vicksburg border. One more important story of the campaign and siege is the preservation of Pemberton's headquarters in downtown Vicksburg. Historically called the Willis-Cowan House, the structure retains much of its historic fabric dating from the siege. I found this photo amongst all the old Shirley House photos and thought, well, I'm going to go find the fireplace that matches this. And I did. It's in one of the front rooms, and it's, if you're facing the street, it's on the right. It's not the red room, it's the other one. So that's the fireplace. A lot of the Greek Revival architecture also incorporated symbolism prominent on park monuments, and this ties back to Ray's in Parker's book. I was standing in the upstairs foyer one day talking to somebody, and I looked up and I saw this molding that went all the way around the foyer, and I said, I know what that is. I've seen that before. It's in the Illinois Monument, all around or above the front entrance. It's called Eggs and Darts. And it means endless cycle of life and death or infinity. It goes on forever. So I thought that was pretty cool that it was also in the Pemberton House. They had put it, and it's a continuous molding. It goes all the way around. It never stops. The house has gone through a lot of incarnations. It was purchased by Martha Willis and Willis-Cowan in 1836. It was the second headquarters for John C. Pemberton. When he decided his first headquarters was a little bit too close to the lines, he got back out of firing range and moved into the Pemberton House. And after the surrender, it was occupied by John Willis, the son of Martha Willis. So it went back into, I think it never left the Willis family, and they moved back in after, unlike the Shirleys who retained ownership and never moved back into their house. It was deeded to Emma Belfort in 1886. The Belforts lived next door. She died in 1887, and the house was eventually deeded by her estate to Mrs. M.F. Common in 1890. And when she died, it went to the Sisters of Mercy, and that's how a lot of people remember that house, as being part of the Sisters of Mercy's fund. They called it St. Anthony's, and after using it as a school for a while, they later used it as a library and housing quarters. This is you can see there's a nursing class right there. The two-story addition on the back was added in 1919. So that's actually been quite a while. It doesn't look like it, but it has been. They closed the school in 1969. It was listed on the National Historic Register of Historic Places in 1970 and became a National Historic Landmark in 1977. So that's two different things. They sold it in 1973. And it changed hands again in 1996 and was renovated as a bed and breakfast. Obviously, it took a while to do that. And it opened in 2000, but it closed in 2001. So it didn't stay as a bed and breakfast very long. And it just became vacant. So, Congress added it to our mandate, added it to the park in 2002. It was something that William Rigby had wanted added to the park in the beginning, but the mandate that was legislated stated only the battlefield, so they couldn't include the house from the city. So it isn't something that was just a whim all of a sudden. It's something that had been wanted to be incorporated in the park for a long time. The actual purchase was by the federal government in 2003. We've got an affidavit from 1903 that details some of the room layout, and I'm kind of guessing at a couple of these, but I think I got it right. This is Pemberton's office, the red room that we have. The Adjutant General's office says it was behind, but I think it was just in the back of that room. I'm not sure how big those offices might have been, because the general office, they said, was behind that, and there's only one other room behind that, so I'm guessing at that. And then the chief ordnance was across the hall. The assistant adjutant general was upstairs in the room right above his office. It now serves as park contact station, houses the park's library, and maintains office space for park staff and the Friends of Vicksburg National Military Park and Campaign. So you can see that management practices and actions to sustain good and or eliminate bad natural resources often work hand in hand with management of cultural resources in this park throughout the whole landscape. Bethlehem Cemetery, which is actually an in-holding in the park, we've had brought crews in to clear out some of the vegetation so we can expose the headstones and things, open that up. Up at Iowa Circle, this is actually behind the Walmart. We've taken out, once again, taken out vegetation to clear out so we can get to these monuments. But we also add vegetation. We have actually planted hydrangeas in the cemetery because this was actually in the original landscaping plan, was to put hydrangeas along this exact spot. So when we had to cover up that fence, that's what we planted.
Those are really big this year.
I know, and they're very sticky.
Yeah.
They hurt, and they got nasty thorns on them. That's why we put them up. But they're getting really big now.
So every time somebody gets stuck, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Virginia, are these Iowa are those Iowa monuments on Iowa Circle
Yeah,
accessible? Last thing I saw. they were
Not
Iowa.
really. We're trying to make them accessible.
Okay.
But right now, it's just a path cut up the to them.
We haven't talked to the SHPO about this yet, but we're talking about, we're talking about moving those monuments up there behind Walmart where they've been vandalized and not really been looked after, down to where the old Kroger's or where Newps is today, where there's already monuments down there, and that's where Harris Brigade, that's what we're talking about right now. We've talked with the National Guard, asking them to help us do that, and once we get help from them, hopefully we'll be talking to the SHPO, of course.
I'll concur.
See, that's a special spot.
Say it in
See,
public.
that's where my great-great-grandfather was, so I'd like to be able to, see that monument.
You want to put back up in the produce section?
I don't think so. So the significance of all resource management at Vicksburg National Military Park can be summed up in this one quote, I think. One way to open your eyes is to ask yourself, what if I had never seen any of this before? It's cool stuff. But if it wasn't taken care of, what if I knew I would never see it again? If we just let it all disappear? That's it. Questions? Yes, sir.
I remember 5 years or so ago, we put a head bust of Ed Bars out by the Cairo, and I don't think it's there now, but I.
It's in the library. In the
Pemberton's headquarters.
Pemberton headquarters, yeah, it's in the library. We got it.
Do you have any plans to add furniture, adding furniture to the Pemberton Airport?
That's another, just like the Shirley House, that's something we need to develop a furnishing plans for and then get the funding for it. Both of the houses, we don't have any record of what it looked like inside during the time, when the Shirleys lived there or when the Pemberton was in it. So we're kind of guessing as far as period
We had
furniture.
a garden club in Vicksburg, and we sold the house that we used to have. They finally donated the furniture we had over to the Southern Cultural Heritage Center. And, it's been a plus, because we couldn't figure out what we were gonna do with it.
Yes, sir.
Are you going to take the addition of the Pemberton House off that was put on in 1909? Or
1919, no, it's been talked about to put it back to the way it was, but I kind of doubt that that's going to happen anytime
And that's where the
soon.
bathrooms are?
No.
There was a discussion when the Park Service first got the house, and Jim is shaking his head because he may have been there with some of that.
Yes.
We involved the State Historic Preservation Office and all that. And the decision was made to leave that on, that addition on. It's just part of the history of the house. There's been so much done in the interior of the house that it really didn't make a difference to take that off.
And you use it.
Yeah, and we use it.
Yeah, we
right.
use it. We use it quite a bit. Yes, sir.
Are there any more plans to open up more land, vegetation, trees?
Not at this time. We've done, essentially what the cultural landscape set out was, the alternative was 90 acres. And right now, that's about as far as the actual total clearing will go.
And to just piggyback on that, there's not much more that we could clear because we can't take care of it. And that's the big thing. If you look at the Graveyard Road area, just look how that was cleared, and it's going to grow up, and we can't manage that. We can take care of the area in front of in the Illinois Monument area. We can take care of the area where the South Loop is. But the terrain in the rest of this park,
We also run into a lot of compliance issues when we start. I told you, we've got a quarter of the park has been classified as wetlands. Wetlands is our biggest issue when we start cutting things down. And so there's a lot of compliance that has to be taken care of. And like Rick says, one of the reasons we didn't go with a larger acreage when we did develop that cultural plan was because we didn't have capabilities of keeping it clear.
and when that study was done, we never thought we would see that in our lifetime, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. If it hadn't been for the donation of Mr. John Now III, that still wouldn't be cleared today.
Yeah. That was something that was supposed to happen way down the road.
Yeah, so we were very fortunate that happened.
Y'all don't maintain as much, do grass on as much as you used to now, do you?
Not as much as they used to say 20 years ago, but we do maintain it's about, I'd say, 600 acres But they mow
between 5 and 600.
500 and 600 acres, they mow. Some of it as turf grass, some of it just as backfields, but they do get out and mow at least that much. The total park is 1,800 acres.
I just noticed a little change.
There's some things that have grown up that probably shouldn't be growing up, that should be cut back, but there's just, it's a matter of personnel and stuff, so.
What do y'all do? Anything at all to that portion of Confederate Avenue that was severed from the park?
The monuments are ours to maintain. The property is turned over to the city, all along Confederate, all the way down to the river. They have to maintain it in a park-like setting. They can't build on it or anything. But the monuments are ours, and we still maintain the monuments. And then we've got the 3 units on the river itself, which are park property.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the last remains of the family? If y'all knew who the person was and how the remains were disposed of?
What remains?
I thought they said the last remains found were.
Oh, that Ray said that, yeah, like over by the Texas or something. I had not heard that. I know that they did find remains while the CCC were working in the park in the 30s. Now, I don't know if they found any from the Civil War era. Since then, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure where they did find those to begin with.
Do you ever do tours for natural resources?
Yeah, I have done several schools and college classes they come through. A lot of it's they're natural resource, and I always try to tie it into the cultural landscape as I'm going through. So yeah, but I do. Yeah. Yes?
They're monuments on Wisconsin Avenue off of Confederate. They're just
Right.
kind of tucked in little places. Or
People's driveways and things like that.
yeah, you doing anything with those?
Those are our, yeah, we have to maintain them. They are ours property.
You're not going to move them?
Well, not at this time. You can still get to those. In Wisconsin, along Indiana Avenue. Where else? We did move the ones off Sherman Avenue and actually brought those into the park. Some of them. There's a couple still on Short Sherman that are outside the park. All the monuments, though, are ours property. The park is responsible for their upkeep and maintenance.
I see that you've got 2 little areas marked off in front of the Iowa monument.
Oh, yeah. I haven't got my signs up yet. Those are my prairie nymph plots. I put those same plots up every single year, and what I try to do is actually count the blossoms in those plots to see if they're how they respond to mowing. And I had the maintenance crew cut that area, all those areas short, because they're just only like 6 inches high, so they need all the help they can get. So if you don't have tall grass around them, they're going to grow better. And they grow right up in the sunlight. They don't like shade at all. So I have roped off those areas for the last 4 or 5 years now, and actually go in and count the blossoms to see if they're getting more and more in those spots. And we actually have increased the population throughout the entire park. When I first got here, you never saw them carpet the roadsides like you do now. So obviously the short grass mowing is to their advantage.
You mentioned the golden bamboo.
Yeah.
We harvested some of that when I was in the 60s when I was a Boy Scout. In a project.
Don't say that.
Yeah, back when the road.
I can't hear you. Even though it is a weed, an exotic.
Is that invasive purple rocktail?
It is. We've been lucky that that spot that we do have has not gotten any bigger than it has, because it is a very invasive species. All you have to do is lay one of those on the ground, and any place where there's a joint in that bamboo will root, shoot up something else. But I don't want to hear that you're cutting bamboo in the park.
Where did that come, and you know when it arrived?
I asked our chief of maintenance, who used to take that road from his house through the park when that still went through, and said, was that bamboo there when you were a kid? He said, yeah. I said, but of course, since the road went through, it was on the side of the road. And once the road was taken out, it just filled in. So it's been here, at least 50-some years. Probably longer.
Virginia, how do they spray it on the curing to preserve it?
a borate solution. It's just, it's,
Still Mississippi State.
yes, yes, the dendrology, because we will come down to dendrology.
And how often?
Supposed to do it every 3 years, Rick? Is that right?
3 to 5
3
years.
to 5 years? So. I know they've done it a couple times since I first started here, but they haven't been able to do it.
And the guy, the professor that did it, he's no longer at Mississippi State, but he's the one who has the contract. His company has the contract to do it. So it's the same guy that's been doing this year after year.
Yes,
For the purposes of the tour, in case anyone asks, are the CCC campsites noted where they were located?
we do have a site bulletin that talks about that and does have a map that shows where they were located in the park. Yes. And one of them actually lies along our Boy Scout trail, primitive hiking trail that we have through the park. You can actually walk along the old road bed where the camp was. In fact, Rick and I walked back there last week.
If you take this first trail right behind the visitor center, walk down there, you walk across a bridge that they built down there, you can see a road down there where, you know, they were driving all over the place in the interior.
There's, yeah, it's really kind of neat. You can tell where they opened the place up.
Is
Yes?
there any idea of how many markers, memorials, monuments are in the woods?
We figured, Terry and I figured about, if you just cut back 20 feet or so, you'd uncover about 20% more markers. You know, there are a lot, and I think I found them all. The original inventory they did in the 30s listed about, I want to say close to, well, it listed 1,700 markers. Not all of those were cited, but there is a site for a lot of things. Like there is a site for a Sherman statue, and there is a site for the McPherson statue. Those things were never put in. I think what ended up, they had about 1,600 that they actually found when they did the inventory in 1933, 39. They did it before the war. And I went back out and over several years have tried to relocate a lot of these markers, and I have come up with almost 1,400 of them. But there are some that are just totally gone. Some of the plaques and things are just missing.
Were they given as a scrap metal drive in the
Yes.
Second World War?
Yes, they were. We lost about 145 tablets, large tablets, the narrative tablets. They melted down for the printer.
But some of those have been replaced too,
We've replaced, I'd say close to 50 of them.
through our friends group.
Yeah, they've replaced a lot of those. And it's hard to tell the difference too.
With the same information?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had all the text. When they did the inventory, this is an interesting aspect. When they did that inventory in the 30s, the WPA came in and did this. They not only just copied the text, but they copied it as it looked on the tablet. So we knew how many words were in the line, and we could reproduce it perfectly. But I did have to go out and measure the width on the edges and the height of the letters and all this, so I could tell that to the people that were fabricating these tablets, and they could get it to look. So you can go out there and it'd be hard pressed to know which tablet was old and which was new. They did a very good job.
That's the thing about the French group too, Nephew. They're also in town. They've replaced some of the ones in town that are not really out here on the site. But if you consider the idea that when they placed them out there, originally you're talking about a $200 placard out there at that time. And they have like $2,300, $2,400 to replace every one of them. Now, so you can imagine how much the Friends has done to replace how many of those that they put out there in that park. I mean, it's a huge money effort just to get them out there in the park. But again, she said, knowing where every one of them, what every one of them say, but it's important where every one of them actually works.
Yeah.
Where you see them placed back is where they were originally.
Yeah, we have got commission maps from the original layout of the park, and that lists all the monuments and plaques on there, whether they were cited or not. But we have probably one of the most accurately marked battlefields in the entire country because of the care that the commissioners took and getting the vendors to come back and help the position. So when all these monuments went out and plaques, they're right on the line, right on the trench. It's quite interesting when you look at some of these maps. I had to go find a monument the other day, so I went back to the old commission maps and I said, okay, I know where this one is because I can see it. And this one is like this here. Got out in the field and walked right up to the one I was looking for. So they're real.
That's one of the great things about it when you find out being a guide. When someone walks up to you and you go, my great-great-grandfather fought in the 17th Illinois Regiment. Do you know where that marker is? And you can take them to that marker and stand them right there, and that's where their relative fought, right there where they were standing. And that's pretty.
That's the best part of the
It's
tour,
pretty amazing when they realize that I'm standing where he stood. And that's a pretty amazing thing when you do that a lot. And that will happen quite a few times too, by the way.
And if you go on our website, you can find those it's on the website where the monument locations are.
And actually, the easiest way of doing that is Google 34th Illinois, Vicksburg, and our page will be one of the first ones that pops up.
Yeah.
Rather than go through the 6 layers on the website.
Or if you happen to have your clients here that you're going to take on the tour and they tell you that, you can just ask at the visitor center desk, can you give me the location? Because you don't know, I certainly don't know where every monument is. I'm not Dave Maggio. But you can ask at the visitor center desk and they'll give you the information, and that way you'll know where it is. Well, hey, it's on Graveyard Road. Well, you know where that is. So it's a piece of cake after that.
Any other questions? I think we're done.
Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you, Nancy.